Welcome to Ask the Experts, where each week we talk to people in the industry, get that inside word on what's happening right now, and what that means for the tactics you should use to make the most of your money. Now, you loved her previous episode on how we get those early money habits really wired into us. Turns out your money personality is set by the time you're 7. But that doesn't mean you have to get it all right from the start or otherwise give up. We can do some things to have better conversations about money with our kids, nieces, nephews, people we just care about. Save them from some of those unhelpful money habits we know have held us back, and we don't want to see them repeated. Now, Julia Jackson is fantastic. I've partnered up with Kiwibank to get the latest research on this one. Julia is their expert who will give us that inside word. Making Sense is on a mission to make money simple, and I just couldn't do that without the support of Kiwibank. It's really important to me to only work with companies that understand that mission. And for Kiwibank, their purpose is to help Kiwi and Aotearoa be better off. So bringing you real stories of different approaches to finance is one of the ways they're making a difference to the lives of their customers. This is making Kiwi better off. This is Kiwi. Welcome back. Loved your previous episode, so let's dive in. We had a little chat last time around. The fact that so much of money is digital now, tap and go. It's very it's not there, it's not concrete, and that can make it a little trickier, I think, to teach kids about money. Do you think that does make it a little more complicated now?
It does make it more complicated. It's undoubtable, but also I think there are opportunities that come with that, right? So there with digital world, not necessarily with digital currency, and there are things that we can do to navigate around this. So it's definitely workable, and there's no point in avoiding it, right? They are going to be living in a world where money is digital, so we need to understand how to help them make sense of it. So a couple of things, and I started to talk about this last time, but a couple of things you can do, particularly when they're younger, and so really grasping those sort of very early concepts of money, is make money tangible. So whether or not you do that via literally giving them notes and coins instead of when the tooth fairy comes, giving them a coin, that's a great learning opportunity, right, around actually how much that is. Or if they're getting pocket money, you could do that in notes and coins rather than depositing it into a fund. Or if you do want to go the digital, online banking route, that's fine. But then think about other ways in which you can translate that for people. So could you have a poster on the wall where you show them how much money they've got, and then when they spend that money, it's sort of almost like I'm imagining, the sort of the charity fundraiser thermometer idea, when it goes up and up and up, and then you're drawing down on that. So actually helping them understand when they make these choices, when they're spending money, what that looks like. You could also, again, use things like not monopoly money necessarily, but, do you use stones or pebbles or something like that? Again, it doesn't need to be physical money, but are there ways in which you can bring that to life physically for your kids? Instead of just giving them the card and they go down to the dairy and get what they want, you can still do that, but how do you then help them understand that they just spent $5 of your money and that's what that represents? That represents, an hour of mum working or whatever that might be. So finding those ways that make sense to your family to translate that into something that your kid values.
I love that you say, this translates into an hour of mum going to work, because I think that's something that we're often quite shy about talking to our kids about, that there's a taboo about talking about money in general, right? Which I think is really hard for us to navigate. And maybe you don't want to talk everything money with every person you ever meet, but I think you should be able to talk about it with your close, immediate family, and to show your kids that that's fine and important is a really important part of the parenting journey. I mean, when it is still such a taboo to talk about money, how do you think we start having those more open conversations about money with kids? Because I know sometimes people are worried about putting too many adult responsibilities onto kids' shoulders or stressing kids out. And I understand that. But I think that it doesn't help to make it a conversation that is not allowed. Do you know what I mean?
This is something that's quite close to my heart. So, I came from a great background, had a very loving family, amazing parents who did so much for me. And I was well looked after with everything. But one thing that I've reflected on in adulthood is they never talked to us, me and my sister, about their financial situation. And we were pretty comfortable. But there were definitely times that I can look back on now that I know that things weren't as easy. Dad left a pretty comfortable job to go out on his own. And I'm sure that when they were going through that time, paying a mortgage, putting 2 kids through school, all of those sorts of things, there would have been quite a lot of uncertainty around when a paycheck was coming in, how fast the work was going to pick up, all of those sorts of things. And they did really try and hide it from us because they wanted to protect us. They wanted, they don't want to put those worries onto us as their kids. But to what we were talking about in the previous episode, kids are sponges. They will pick up on it whether you talk to them about it or not. To your question around how do you do it in a safe way and an age-appropriate way, again, I think that potentially is something that's quite family specific, whether you sit them all down at the table and, some families will be incredibly open, right? Like their kids might know their salary, they might have a family budget, and they'll make those decisions together. So that's really good for some families. Other families might want to just talk a little bit more about, hey, these costs came in and we're going to have to pay for them and that's why we can't do X, Y, Z. So just explaining things to your kids, I think, can actually really help that.
I love that. I really love that. It's quite validating sometimes having these conversations as well, because it really does. I don't think there's any way to have these conversations without reflecting on what you're doing and sort of grading it as you're going and thinking, okay, am I hitting this? Am I hitting that? And, my oldest is only 3 coming up 4, which is wild to me. So we're not necessarily always talking about salary and things, because I think that's still a bit over his head. But he understands things like, Mummy runs her own business, and it sometimes means she works funny hours because I might do breakfast TV, or I might go up to Auckland for a day to have a bunch of meetings and recordings. And it's these things that we'll have these conversations of, well, Mum goes to work. We get lots of opportunities from that work. That means we can do things like buy you the frozen blueberries that go on your breakfast every morning. Those things are expensive.
They're very expensive. I mean, that is a full-time job to pay for that.
Why are toddlers addicted to berries? What is up with that? People talk about daycare costs. They're not talking about berries costs. We try to keep the conversation very sort of empowered and, well, sometimes you have to do this, but it means you get that. And I think that's been something that we've found has really worked and kind of got through to them. But again, it's going to be so different kid by kid, right? On what gets through to different kids.
Yeah, and you could test and learn, right? You could try doing a few things and see if it works. If it doesn't, move on,
Yeah.
And pocket money is a really similar thing, right? Like, so my daughter is similar in toddler years, so I'm not there yet. But I know from lots of parents, when they get to the age when you might start giving pocket money, that in and of itself is a whole thing around, well, do you want to, put jobs associated with earning the pocket money? So there's a sort of
way into that debate actually for me, because I get that question all the time. When do you stand on the pocket money thing and how you dish it out?
So one approach I've seen that people do is that there's jobs that everyone in the household has to do, right? So stacking the dishwasher, making your bed, putting your clothes in the dirty washing basket are just things that need to happen.
Mm-hmm.
But washing the windows, washing the car, those sorts of things are maybe the additional jobs that sort of a little bit more discretionary, and probably potentially you could choose the ones that you really hate doing, because,
cleaning the cat litter box.
Yeah, exactly. But again, that's the responsibility of having a pet, right? So there's an opportunity to teach about that, and those are the things that you could earn pocket money for. So that is, I think, is quite a sort of a rounded approach where you're not saying, what you're teaching is that the kid won't ever do anything unless they're getting rewarded for it, which I think could be quite a challenging position, particularly again for certain personalities, certain kids. But you're also not just sort of assigning no value to contributing and to supporting and actually sort of doing jobs. Making their school lunches could be another one, right? Do you decide that that's just something that they have to do, or actually that could be something that you choose to include in your pocket money reward?
Yeah. Did you know your kid's money mindset could be locked in by age 7? Julia from our friends at Kiwibank shares how to raise kids who are smart with their cash and what you can do now to shape those habits early. Listen to the episode from 19 June. By age 7, your money personality is locked in. But can you change it? This is making Kiwi better off. This is Kiwi. Because it is tricky when you start to give kids more responsibility. I mean, like any responsibility really, as they're growing up, it's always this constant tension of how much responsibility can they take on now, how much is overloading them. So I think that's a constant balancing act, but also to give kids more responsibility with their money and how you figure out what the right time is to do that. I mean, what's the sliding scale there as they get older, and how do you sort of check in on that?
Yeah, so I think a really important thing around money and building sort of positive money behaviors from a young age is allowing kids to make mistakes and accepting that that might happen. Because if you never make a mistake, you're never going to learn, right? And again, as parents, and if I reflect on my parents, they didn't do this in everything, but they wanted to insulate us in some ways from some of the stresses that they were going through. But the downside of that is that you come out with a relatively rosy view of the world and think that life's going to be quite easy, and it's not always. So again, if we go with a pocket money example, right, where your kids, or it doesn't have to be pocket money, but maybe maybe their grandparents give them some birthday money or whatever, looking at, how do you let the kid actually make their own choices around how they want to spend it? Mm-hmm. And you might want to put boundaries on that. So you might want to say, actually, we're going to save half of that, and then you can choose how you spend half of that. And talking about the different decisions around how you spend your money. So again, one of my nephews is a great saver, but because he loves buying Jordans, right? Like 12-year-old who's buying Jordans, but
it's all about finding the motivation.
Yeah. Apparently, and he will do his research around the Jordans. He will save up to buy his Jordans. So,
it's glorious. I love
letting him spend the money might actually be him choosing to put it into a savings account because he knows that that's going to build up to something he really wants. But for other kids, they might choose to go and spend that at the dairy buying lollies because that's what they want to do. And also, then what they'll see is potentially their siblings or their friends have now got Jordans and they don't, and you can have a conversation around that. So I think part of it as well is giving them these moments when they can safely experiment with money.
Yeah.
And small amounts of money is always the easiest way to do that, right? That's one way that you can do that safely. There are apps as well for kids that help teach financial literacy that are out there. So
do you have any recommendations on that front? I know people are always keen for recs on that.
I know a lot of parents use Square One, which is fundamentally sort of a pocket money app that is more a bit tied to real money. Spriggy is another example, which comes from Australia, which has a bit more of the financial education built in. And then in a school environment, we partner with an organisation called Banker, who have an incredible platform which basically runs a virtual economy for kids. So it is all completely safe. They're earning money, but it's not real dollars, and they get the opportunity to see how they choose that. So if that's something that your school isn't using, or that your kid's school isn't using already, then I would really encourage you to have a conversation with your teacher about that. Kiwibank sponsorship, this is not part of the podcast, but Kiwibank sponsorship does make that free for primary schools to use. So so it should be something that is relatively easy for them to implement. And we have amazing, the stories that come from that are really amazing around just the aha moments that kids have around money. I think that's a really nice way where in a learning environment as well, they can safely experiment with money.
Brilliant. Oh, some great top tips there. Thank you so much. That's Julia Jackson from Kiwibank. Now, if this episode was helpful to you, firstly, make sure you've hit subscribe to get more like it. Secondly, send it to a friend so we can all get better with money together. And if you have more things that you'd like Julia to come back and demystify some more kids and money chat, then let us know. We can always bring her back on. Personally, I've loved these chats. Until next time, however, have a great day. Just a note before you go. This podcast can only give you general information about how things work in most cases. It's not individual financial advice. We're all different, so some of this might not apply to your specific situation. Take what works for you, ignore the rest. If you're after individual financial advice, a financial advisor is always the best bet.